Connecting video sources to Open Broadcaster Software Studio, or OBS. Once OBS is installed and basically configured, you're ready to connect video sources to the software, which the software can then switch between and deliver to a variety of outputs. To get an idea of what we mean here, let's take a look at a schematic diagram of OBS here in the center as a virtual video switcher. You can connect a variety of video sources to OBS, ranging from webcams, like external webcams or built-in webcams on a laptop, to other types of cameras, camcorders, so on, and internal video sources like the display signal going to your computer screen. These sources all have to be connected to your computer in some way, either internally, like the screen here, or this built-in webcam, or through a USB port, like an external webcam or a camcorder. What OBS does here is allow you to select which of these sources is output to any one of a variety of destinations at a given time. And OBS allows you to dynamically switch between these inputs on command during a live stream or a recording or a Zoom session. Indeed, the typical outputs for OBS include a live streaming service like YouTube, or a recording, which is recorded to your local hard drive, or, as we're going to emphasize in these tutorials, output to Zoom in such a way that the output of OBS becomes a video input for Zoom. So this is the general idea we're working with here, with OBS at the center of a series of inputs which can be directed under your command to a variety of outputs. But the first thing we've got to do is connect these video sources to OBS. And that's the subject of this tutorial. To do this, we go to this sources box here in the lower tier of the OBS display. And of course, when OBS is first installed, there are no sources connected. To connect one or more video sources, which are already physically connected in some way to your computer, but to connect those sources with the software, we go to this plus sign here at the base of the sources box, and we pick the type of source that we're going to connect. Most of the time, those will be video capture devices, like cameras. I'll select video capture device, and I'm asked to either add one that already exists, which we don't have yet, or create a new source for OBS. I can name that source anything I want. The default name is video capture device in this case, because that's the option we selected, but we probably need to be a bit more specific and mnemonic than that. I'm going to start by connecting the built-in webcam in the computer. This is a laptop, to OBS. We'll just call this internal webcam. You can call it anything as long as it makes sense to you. And then we'll click OK. And that brings up the properties box, and OBS proceeds to search for available cameras or video capture devices that it has connected to it. You'll get a list of them here under this device menu, which you can open up and see. And it's just picked, for some reason, it's picked the internal webcam, which happened to be the one I wanted in this case. So I'm good. Usually, there's nothing that you need to change among these options here. If you see the input source appearing on the screen and it looks good, you're probably fine. So you can just hit OK, and you've added your first source. That wasn't very hard. Well, let's add another one. Typically, you'll have several video sources among which you can switch and send those on to your output. So we'll get another one here. We have at least one more camera attached to this system. I'll once again go to that plus sign. And this will also be since I'm looking for a camera, this will be a video capture device. And this one is an external webcam, a Logitech C920 webcam. So we'll call it that, Logitech C920 webcam, just to remind us what it is. And we'll OK that. And then under the device list here, we'll look for that option. When you plug the C920 webcam into the computer then knows what it's called because that information is sent through the USB port. And there it is. Not exactly the same name, but that's the camera we want. And it shows up in my preview window here. So obviously the software is connected to that camera. The camera is sending input to it. There's a subtle clue here that things may not be entirely optimal with the settings on this one, though. That rectangle looks like about a 4:3 aspect ratio, 4 wide and 3 high, which indicates that this webcam is not giving us the best resolution that it could, the sharpest picture that it could. This is something you just find out the hard way later on usually, but I know this webcam, I know it can do better than that. So what can we do about that? Well, we have a couple of resolution settings here that we can mess with. First option is the resolution type, and it says the default is device default, but this webcam doesn't default to its highest resolution of which it's capable. So if we open that menu by clicking on this menu button over here, we'll see that there's an option to set a custom resolution for this camera. Again, this may or may not be necessary with most webcams. And once we set that resolution type to custom, we can actually choose a resolution, a numeric resolution from this menu. And I happen to know maximum resolution image possible from this webcam is full high definition, which is 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels down. That's so-called 1080p or full high definition. So I'm going to select that, and boom, and now you can see this is the aspect ratio here is more what you expect from a high definition camera. It's actually 16 across by 9 down in ratio. 1920 across and 1080 down is 16 by 9. So this webcam is now giving us the best picture it can. And again, this is something if you had just gone ahead with the defaults on this, you would be unhappy with the resolution on the webcam later and would have to come back and alter this, which you can always do. But I'll just mention with this, since this is a very common type of webcam, I'll mention that this is something you probably want to do with this webcam when connecting it to OBS. All right, once we've got that done, we'll click OK. We have a second source. And we can use those sources in various ways in OBS. And we can keep on adding cameras to OBS as sources. A third type of camera that might be useful in an instructional situation is a USB connected document camera. And go through the same process again, adding a source, selecting video capture device, and in this time we're going to call this doc cam, or whatever we like, and click OK. Then we'll select, we don't want another instance of our integrated camera, but since I've attached this document camera to my computer, it shows up in the device list here when I'm adding a source. That's the IPvo Ziggy high definition document camera. Just select that. That's what that's seeing right now. Once again, it looks like this resolution, this default resolution, is probably not getting the best out of this document camera. I know it's capable of doing high definition video, and that is definitely not high definition simply by the aspect ratio. It tells me that this is a 4:3 aspect ratio, nearly square. That's not high definition. So it's always worth checking to see if I can get better performance out of the camera by once again going to this resolution type, selecting custom, and selecting from that the resolution list that's now available, the 1920 by 1080 high definition. And there we go. And now we've got a 16:9 appearing aspect ratio. We're getting better performance from the camera. So we'll add that to our source list by clicking OK. And there it is. It's a little fuzzy, but that's probably because the camera itself is not focused. I'll reach over and hit the focus button. And there we go. And now we have a whiteboard equivalent. I can put three-dimensional objects on here like this pen, or I can just write on it and share diagrams and text that I'm writing with OBS. I can write equations, for instance, mathematical equations, and things like that. Or I can draw graphs, or whatever else I'd like to share with my stream or my students in Zoom, or however I'm using the output of OBS. So now I have three cameras, three sources added to OBS. I want to show you how to add one other type of source that's very useful in instructional situations. That's called a display capture. We can actually have OBS capture a screen that's attached to your computer. This really only works, particularly with Zoom, if you have multiple monitors on your computer. As I do here, I have another monitor attached to this laptop. It's generally very easy to attach a second monitor to a laptop and get it to function as an extended desktop so that you can move windows back and forth between the two monitors and so on, and utilize it that way. And this gives you some really interesting capabilities in OBS that we'll look at in the next tutorial. But at this point, I'm just going to show you how to add a display capture source to OBS. As before, we'll start by clicking the Add button, the plus sign button in the Sources box. And one of our options for adding sources is a display capture source. We click that. We can just call it Monitor 2 Capture. Again, I could call it Fred if I wanted to. And I'll click OK. And by default, it tries to capture my monitor number 1, my primary monitor. In this case, the LCD monitor built into the laptop. That's not too useful, and you can see why, because of this cascading mirroring effect. But I can select from this display list here, if I have a second monitor connected, my second monitor, which is just showing a Windows desktop right now. And click OK. And now I have 4 very functional video sources attached to OBS, and I'm ready to begin using them. In order to do that, I'm going to have to create what are called scenes, and that's going to be the subject of our next tutorial. There's one other type of source I'd like to illustrate here and add to our sources list by going to the plus sign again, and that's something called a display capture. This allows you to take whatever's being displayed on your computer screen and send that out to your outputs, like to Zoom. That's very useful. It's kind of like sharing your screen in Zoom, except that you're not using Zoom to do it. You're using OBS to do it. And there are certain advantages to that approach that we'll see later on in these tutorials. So let's add a display capture video source to OBS by selecting that option from this menu. And we'll create a new, since we haven't added a display capture option before, we'll add this one. If you have multiple screens attached to your computer that you're running OBS on, you can have multiple different screen capture sources, one for each screen. But in this case, we only have the one screen. I'm going with the base system here. So I'm just going to call this display capture or screen capture. There we go. Maybe get a space in there. All right. Again, I could call it Fred if I wanted to, as long as I knew what that meant. I will now go ahead and OK that. And I get a rather busy, puzzling looking display. This is kind of like standing between two parallel mirrors. You see these infinite reflections because I am configuring OBS on the screen that I'm trying to share, and it gets in kind of a loop. Not to worry, this will not be a problem when you're actually using this with Zoom. So but this display tells me that in fact I have created, or I've added this source properly to OBS. And once I click OK here anyway, that source will be added. So I have a list of 3 sources here that I've connected to OBS that I can use in streaming directly to the internet, or recording to my local hard drive, or, as we'll be doing in this series of tutorials, sending this video output to Zoom so that it appears in Zoom as an input source. In the next tutorial, we're going to see how to use these sources and switch between them by creating scenes.